Now, this is, to me, even more so than Anthony Richardson, the most controversial, most third rail of all the quarterback prospects in this year's NFL draft. It's Will Levis. It really, really is. As you know, when you talk about Anthony Richardson, sure, you could have a varied mix of opinions here, but man, it really goes a whole nother level when you're talking about Levis, which is fascinating to me. And I will say, there are probably a number of you that assumed going into this that he was going to be my QB1 when all was said and done. I'm sure there were some of you that were sitting there waiting for me to say Will Levis is my QB1, because then you could sit there and talk about it being racist because I have Will Levis as my QB1. And let me talk about that for just a moment. I think it's really stupid, right? Like, if you watch these guys and you watch their film and you study them, and if you have an opinion that puts a prospect in position 1 versus 2, 3, or 4, just because you don't agree with their take doesn't automatically make it racist. That's fucking stupid. And by the way, Will Levis will not be QB1 in this draft for me. He's just not. Although I wonder someday if I will regret not calling him QB1. But that's so stupid. Now, do I think, when I see what some of the people talk about and some of the takes that I've seen about Levis, do I think they're off the mark a little bit based off of the reality of what he showed the last 2 years at Kentucky? You're goddamn right they do. Do I have a tremendous amount of concern about taking a guy in the top 5 of the draft that puts mayonnaise in his fucking coffee? Fucking A right I do. Like, who does that, Will? Mayonnaise? Mayonnaise? In your coffee? Mayo's bad enough, but in your coffee? Fucking disgusting. That's disgusting. That should make him undraftable. Horrible. But anyways, on to the more relevant things. Levis was a guy that I wanted to make sure I certainly spent some time watching his 2021 film as well. Because I know he lost some guys on that offensive line. He didn't have Wan'Dale Robinson in 2022. So I wanted to see how he looked like with maybe a little bit better offensive talent around him in 2021 and then what he looked like in 2022 without that. And you have a lot of people that have certainly put out takes about Levis and talking about how they feel like he's bust city baby and that he just doesn't have it. And I don't know that I can agree with that. I would almost venture a guess that my views and my thoughts on Will Levis are a lot more closely aligned with a lot of NFL teams than a lot of other fans and draft media, draft Twitter folks, etc. It doesn't make me right. I'm just saying, like, in relation to the NFL, at least, my position is probably going to be less controversial than many others. But I look at Levis, and there were things I liked, and I thought even some of the weaknesses that were called out about his game, I just didn't find as big of a problem as maybe some others did. Now, granted, that in part could be because I'm a guy that looks at him and says, you know, and just with quarterbacks in general, like, I do have a tendency to be a little biased towards the physical tools, like the size and the arm strength especially, and the special arm talent. And that shit matters, right? So that bias isn't unfounded. But he certainly got, in terms of strengths, he's got prototype size for the position, very solid physical build. He's a guy that you look at and you would anticipate, physically at least, being able to hold up at the NFL level. He absolutely has high-end arm strength. He can easily make all the required NFL throws. Where when you look at the scouting reports I've done so far on the quarterbacks, you know, Bryce Young's arm is, C.J. Stroud's arm is pretty good. Will Levis's is another level. Richardson's another level, right? Richardson's arm strength is probably closer aligned to the Josh Allens and the Mahomeses of the world. Levis isn't quite that strong. You're probably going to see a number of takes here comparing him to Josh Allen, and no. I promise you, as a guy who had Josh Allen as QB1 on his board in 2018 when I watched him at Wyoming, Will Levis did not give me those same vibes, I promise you. I promise you. He certainly doesn't have that same special arm that Josh Allen did. He didn't quite have that physicality that Josh Allen did, and still does, obviously. But you do like, he's got that size, he's got that big-time arm strength, not, you know, like top 3 of the league, but he certainly would be in the top 5 to 10 range of the league in terms of his arm. He's able to buy time with his feet. He can create some damage as a runner, both in terms of his speed, but also in terms of his physicality as a runner. He could pick up some tough yards, although you maybe don't always want your quarterback to do it. He did show some feel for being able to do the hook slide. You want him to be careful, like the best of ability you can have as an NFL quarterback is availability, and Levis is going to have to keep himself healthy to be available, to be able to do what he can do at the NFL level. He did show ability to go through his progressions and be aware of his checkdowns, his hot reads. He showed that he was able to go to his second, his third, or even fourth option. He could sometimes go back and forth. I wouldn't put him on the same level as a C.J. Stroud or a Bryce Young in this draft class. But, you know, if you're just going to sit there and say Levis primarily just stared down his primary read and that was it, he has a bad problem with tunnel vision and laser focus, I throw the bullshit flag on that one. Are his, like, instincts and vision and feel the same as the other guys I just mentioned? No, they're not. But I think this is actually a little bit of an underrated element of his game. I really do. I was more impressed with it than I expected to be. He shows his ability to go through his progressions and generally is able to respond quickly to what he sees. You would see some moments where he would have a little hesitation to do the little pump fake, but generally seem to react pretty quickly to what he sees, which to me is an important trait. It doesn't matter if you can see the entire field. If you're slow as hell to react to it and you don't trust it, that really concerns me about how well you're going to be able to do as a passer at the NFL level. Sometimes you've got to be able to trust things you don't even see, let alone things you see. He does have the ability to improvise when the initial play breaks down. He shows the feel to throw the stop fade, the back shoulder fade to the right spot. Not perfectly, not all the time, but he does show the ability to do that. Like sometimes when you're looking at some of these prospects, you're looking more at the upside of what they can do, what are the flashes of what they could show. Because if they show they could do it sometimes, you think with more work, more practice, better coaching, they'll be able to do it even more. But he certainly has some weaknesses in this game, and they're fair to call out. You know, he won't always use his lower body in his throwing motion, and you'll see some guys with strong arms that do that. You know, the problem with Levis, though, is that when he doesn't utilize his feet, like his footwork's kind of choppy. It's not great. Certainly not, you know, at the same class of like a Stroud or a Young in this draft, for sure. When he doesn't use his feet as part of his throwing motion, there is a bit of a tendency for his balls over the middle to be a tad high. That could sound really fucked up if you wanted to twist my words a different way. But his throws over the middle can be a tad high, in part because he hangs back on them, right? He doesn't utilize his whole body in his throwing motion. And we talk about arm strength all you want, but the legs can be a very valuable tool. You know, think about similar to a major league pitcher, right? Especially when you go back to Roger Clemens. You can talk about roids and everything else, but guys like him and Kerry Wood, yeah, they had great arm strength, but part of the reason they were able to throw with such tremendous velocity was because of their tremendously strong lower bodies. So you want to be able to incorporate your whole body in your throwing motion, and Levis is very hit or miss sometimes with that. I referenced it a moment ago. You know, he sometimes will hesitate or double pump, like he'll see something, and he probably knows he should throw it, but then he gets concerned and he pumps it, and then he'll throw it right to that same spot. You got to be okay sometimes with taking that first available throw. It wasn't a huge problem, but you would see it once or twice a game, right? So it's something that stood out in my mind a little bit, is saying he doesn't necessarily always trust what he sees. He can be good to react to things and quick to react to the things that he sees, but he has a moment or two sometimes where he will have some doubt a little bit. Also, his accuracy certainly can be a little hit or miss. It can be a little scatterballed at times. I wouldn't classify him as wildly inaccurate, you know, because some of the ones that throws that go as incompletions are balls that hit, they're throws that hit wide receivers right in the hands. And I have a general rule of saying, even if the throw's not perfect, if the ball hits you in your hands as a receiver, you need to be able to catch that damn ball. Right? But his accuracy generally, and his ball placement specifically, can be better, because you have times where you've got a guy streaking over the middle of the zone. He'll sense it, he'll read it, he'll anticipate it, he'll throw it, but then the guy's got to jump up or they got to reach behind him, and it interrupts their stride, and it can prevent a bigger play from happening because the quarterback was off the mark. He also had some performances in 2022 that gave me some pause. You know, the Tennessee game certainly wasn't great. A couple of those interceptions were doo-doo. So if you're on the I don't like Will Levis bandwagon and you point to a performance like the Tennessee game, be like, yeah, that was not good. I'll grant you that. But when I look at Levis, I did still come away impressed. He has the prototype size. He has prototype arm strength. His accuracy, I think, is a little better than people give it credit for. His instincts and feel for the position, I think, are a little bit better than people give it for. He's not a polished product by any means. You know, you could question, like, hey, he didn't make it at Penn State, and, you know, he went to Kentucky, like, you thought he would have done a little better. I mean, there are valid questions here, right? It's risk-reward when you talk about drafting quarterbacks, especially in the NFL. But this is a guy that I think put in a good situation with some good coaching. Like, if I looked at the Indianapolis Colts, and Colts fans are about to burn me in effigy here for saying that, but being able to play under a good offensive mind, a good quarterback coach, an offensive coordinator, now head coach like Shane Steichen, like, that's a really good situation for Will Levis, especially behind a good offensive line there in Indianapolis. Like, that would be a real good situation, whereas opposed to if he went to Las Vegas and he was working with Josh McDaniel, I'd feel a whole hell of a lot less optimism for him. You know, seeing Levis in a place like Indianapolis or Detroit, like, if those teams have a chance to take this guy, they've got to strongly consider it, because the payoff there could be quite massive. When I look at a comparison for Levis, you're going to see a lot of Josh Allen. I think he's more in the Matthew Stafford mold. Strong arm, but not the strongest. Good athlete, but not elite athlete. Sometimes the accuracy can be a little hit or miss. Sometimes you question a little bit about their decision-making, what they see, but they do show some feel for the position, the ability to go through their progressions. Like, when I watched Levis, it reminded me of watching Stafford at Georgia and even Stafford in the early years in the NFL. So I thought it was an appropriate comparison. And that's where I still have a first-round grade on Will Levis. Maybe I'm hedging my bets here a little bit and I'll regret it someday, or maybe I'll be thankful because at least I won't go down with the Will Levis was QB1 in this draft class take. But I have him above Bryce Young. I have him below C.J. Stroud because I think his upside is higher than Bryce Young's. And I don't think he's as far behind C.J. Stroud in terms of what you would look at as a quarterback prospect as you might anticipate. Stroud is safer, but the upside certainly is higher there with Levis. And, you know, just one good thing I call out about all of these quarterbacks in this year's draft, they seem to all be like really high character guys. You know, Young, Stroud, Richardson, Levis as well. So in that respect, you feel like these guys will work hard, they'll work their tails off. You know, and with the right coaching and in the right situation, I think we could be looking at Levis as another one of those guys that's in like the 8 to 12 or maybe the 10 to 14 level in terms of NFL starting quarterbacks.